Okay, welcome everybody to the Broadband Advisory Committee. It is 6:32, so roll call. Everybody is present. I will call the meeting to order. And do we have any disclosure of pecuniary interest on the agenda this evening? None, so that will be noted. And we do have a delegation this evening from Dan Sorelli, President and CEO of Connecting Windsor Essex. And Dan, welcome.
Thank you.
And I will turn the floor over to you.
So just if I can, Mr. Chair, just by way of introduction for our delegation this evening, like you said, it's Mr. Dan Sorelli, who's President and CEO of Connecting Windsor Essex. So some of you might have heard that name before. It's sometimes referred to as CWE as the short form. So CWE, they've been very active in the region, exploring secure broadband connectivity for residents and businesses. And Dan's been with CWE since 2016, and he brings over 30 years of experience in technology in the public and private sector in our region. So back in the spring, when Tecumseh Council approved the formation of our committee, Dan was one of the first to reach out as a local partner and offer any assistance from CWE that we could get. So with that, we welcome Dan tonight, and I'll turn it over to Dan now. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean, for the introduction. And I've prepared a slide deck to walk through. Sean, are you going to show that and navigate it, or should I just show my slides?
Yeah, I'll share my screen here. Give me one sec.
Okay. So just while Sean's getting that ready, again, I'll just say thanks for giving us the opportunity to speak and to present on behalf of CWE. As Sean mentioned, when we saw the news about the committee coming together, I reached out promptly to say, hey, is there anything that we can help with? Is there any information that we can share? And Sean said, you're exactly the kind of organization they would be reaching to at some point as the committee forms and starts to learn about how to progress forward. So Sean, if you want to move forward from the title slide. So I didn't want to presume that people understood who Connecting Windsor Essex is. So I thought I should talk a little bit about who we are, as well as the key initiatives that we're engaged in, sort of, past, present, and future of those initiatives and how those are driving community impact for our region. And then after all of that, I know that this Rural Broadband Committee has been formed here to sort of assess how do you get to underserved areas? How do you get to these people that are still don't have the right kind of connectivity? So I want to share some of our experiences and some things you might want to consider as you go through that process. And then I'll end it there with a thank you and then open it up for Q&A. So go ahead, Sean, move forward. So just so everyone understands that Connecting Windsor Essex is a not-for-profit organization. We've actually been around for over 25 years, and we are governed by our board of directors, and our board of directors is made up of executive management from the County of Essex, the City of Windsor, the University, St. Clair College, Essex County Library, Public School Board, Catholic School Board, and the French Catholic School Board. The mission statement of Connecting Windsor Essex is to provide world-class connectivity and technological innovation in Windsor Essex County through our collaborative partnerships, knowledge sharing, and leveraging our collective investments and service facilitation. So our core competency is about providing network technology and connectivity. And under our umbrella, we have over 200 locations across the entire Windsor Essex region that we provide fiber access broadband to. Sean, if you want to move forward. So some of our key initiatives, again, from the past and the present and in the future. We were the lead participant in representing the region as a top 7 intelligent community. We are actively engaged in an initiative known as Technovation. We really advocate for digital equality, or in other words, what can we be doing to close the digital divide? And then what are we bringing innovatively to our group? And then how do we continue to advocate our mandate to bring more broadband to the region? And then specifically now, secure broadband to the region. Go ahead, Sean. So what is an intelligent community, and what does that mean to the region? You know, a decade ago, CWE was the lead participant representing Windsor-Essex to compete in the global competition of being recognized as an intelligent community. And that result ended up with us being recognized as a top 7 intelligent community around the world. And what intelligent communities do is you have a lot of agencies, different organizations, and they focus efforts under 6 key indicators. And these indicators are broadband, knowledge workforce, innovation, digital equality, sustainability, and advocacy. So I'm going to talk a little bit about just some of these particular indicators that CWE is actively engaged in. We wouldn't be actively engaged in all of these things, but we do work with other agencies throughout the region that are engaged with them. So go ahead, Sean, move forward. So I'll start with number 2 with knowledge workforce. And it's a space that makes sense to us, given that 5 of our 8 stakeholders represent the educational sector. So we are the ambassadors for the Technovation Girls Windsor-Essex initiative here. And Technovation is a global tech education nonprofit which inspires young girls to be leaders and problem solvers in their lives and in the community. So the program is designed specifically for girls, young women, ages 8 to 18, to become engaged and to learn how to become a tech entrepreneur and a tech leader. So with the support of volunteer mentors and parents, girls work in teams to actually code a mobile application. And that application is its intent is to be designed to address a social issue or a real world problem. And we're really happy and very proud of the result in our very first year of bringing Technovation to the region and getting a number of the schools throughout the region engaged. A team of girls from Massey Secondary School made it all the way to 2nd place in the Canadian national competition. So the way that works is first there's a local competition, and the winners of that go to a regional competition, and the winners of that go to a national competition. And so we had a team in our very first year make it all the way and was recognized as 2nd place in the Canadian national competition. And so shamelessly, while I have everyone's attention, we're always interested in more coaches and mentors to participate in our Technovation Girls initiative. Registrations, well, the campaign for registration starts in early October, goes through November and December, and then registrations begin in January. So if anyone has any more questions or any more interest in this, Sean, I'm sure you can share my contact information following the presentation today. If you want to move forward. So another key indicator is what can our region be doing to satisfy digital equality, or more specifically, what can we be doing to close the digital divide? And interestingly, a report that came out from the World Economic Forum was that the digital divide was exposed during the pandemic. It's hard to do a presentation on broadband and digital divide without talking about the pandemic, because it clearly exposed that divide. And it became understood that 60% of adults are lacking the digital skills required to work from home or to learn and access critical services. So that tells us just how important it is to continue to make efforts towards closing that digital divide. Most recently, CWE was a lead participant in a grant application for just under $500,000 to support broadband expansion in underserved areas throughout the Lakeshore area and south of Lakeshore. And basically, we partnered with Gosfield North and Wave Direct on this. They approached us because in order to apply for the grant, you had to be a not-for-profit organization like a CWE. And they said, listen, there's this grant money that's available, but we need a not-for-profit to participate. We know you, you know us. Would you mind being the lead participant in helping us do this? And so we immediately said, yes, of course we would. This is exactly the type of work that we want to be engaged in. And we were glad that they approached us. But as part of the discussions, you know, we're not just looking to help private sector businesses just get more business and get it through some grant dollars. We want to make sure that there's a greater win than just that. And so we said, well, you know, can we get some free Wi-Fi for downtown areas? And they said, you know what, we've already put that in consideration as part of the application. And so as part of the effort, we will see free Wi-Fi for the downtown Lakeshore area, as well as a couple of baseball parks, public baseball parks in Woodsley and Bell River. So we really applaud their effort, and we were really proud to be that lead participant in applying for that grant. And then if we go back and think about the early days of the pandemic in March of 2020, you know, when that first major lockdown hit, and that really impacted young families and students from home, how will they continue their education? And as you're well aware, we have a number of areas that lack adequate connectivity or have no connectivity. So we were really asked to lean into the relationships we have with our suppliers, and we reached out to everyone. I mean, we have relationships with Cogeco, we have relationships with Bell, we have relationships with Rogers, relationships with MNSI, Gosfield North, Wave Direct. And so we reached out to everyone and said, how can you help? And of course, everywhere across Canada was doing the same thing. We're really proud of the work that TELUS did to help us get wireless devices and get those into the hands of families. And at the end of the day, we were able to help out over 400 families to get connected so that those children could continue to participate in their studies. The other relationship we have with TELUS, and this is a very, very unique relationship, a very powerful one, is we broker mobile plans for all of our stakeholders, all of those public sector stakeholders that I mentioned earlier. And TELUS does a really great job working with their local distributor, SmartCell, in providing those mobile plans. And we have a very, very competitive rate in those mobile plans. But just as important as that, as we look to digital equality, how can we leverage that aggregated demand to say, that's fantastic that these employees of these organizations can have access to great plans, but how can their families get access to plans? And so they've agreed to make the employee purchase plans available to every family member of anyone that participates in the negotiated CWE TELUS plans, and those that belong as members to Connecting Windsor-Essex. And some of those discounts go as far as 30% than what we see on the street. So those are some considerable savings. I'd like to see that, you know, to be honest here, I'd like to see even more savings. Canada does pay some of the highest rates in the world for mobile plans. But regardless, we're really happy with the results that TELUS is bringing us. And we estimate that we've probably got about over 14,000 devices across families and family members in Windsor-Essex as a result of this relationship. So go ahead, Sean, move on. So as we look at connectivity and back to our core competency of technology and networking, how do we get innovative in this space to try to find ways to, again, close that digital divide? So just in the late spring, so I want to say like early June of 2021, the announcement of the Starlink satellite systems became known. And it was, I think it was like the end of June, early July, when actually Windsor-Essex fell in the map of being able to be served by the Starlink systems. And I immediately applied, gave them my down payment for a satellite system. I haven't received mine yet, And I think it's got a lot to do just because of where I happen to reside in LaSalle. But I do believe there are some people in Windsor, Essex that have received some satellites. So we looked at this, we looked at this technology, and the first thing we said is, okay, well, we need to understand it. I mean, this is our core competency, is networking technology. So we should understand this so that we can share our knowledge of the quality and the capability of the service. And the other thing is connectivity infrastructure, fiber to the premise or fiber to the home, as we like to call it. That's still the preferred method of connecting, but it takes time. Construction takes a great deal of time to get out into rural and underserved areas. And so we wanted to understand, is this a viable service that could be used in some of our stakeholders' premises and across the schools? So it allows us to get to rural and underserved areas very, very quickly. So we've begun a process of initiating a testing of the Starlink satellite systems. Our board of directors has approved a research and development budget for our organization. And the first activity towards that budget is going to be a request to support Starlink satellite testing. We intend to test the satellites in a lot of various different areas, very rural, underserved areas, and we intend to do the testing for over 12 months. And now I come to probably our most significant impact that we've been able to have for our region and for the community, is the support in terms of networking technology for our 3 school boards, the French Catholic Board, the Public School Board, and the Catholic School Board. Basically in 2014 and 2015, the Ministry of Education was looking at the types of networking technology that school boards were using across Ontario. And they made a conscientious decision to say, we need to make a change, because the demand for the broadband is only going to increase and increase dramatically. But the cost of the current technological infrastructure that we have is very, very expensive and only going to continue to get much more expensive. Can we do this another way? So not to get too far into the weeds of a networking technology, but basically there's a dedicated networking infrastructure, which is, as you can see, I put it here in brackets as costly. It's a fantastic service. And as a matter of fact, it's a service that we provide to the municipality of Tecumseh and to the Tecumseh Library. And then there's the alternate choice, which we would call non-dedicated internet, or I'll call it budget friendly. It's not as secure and it's not as fast as we would say, but it is considerably more budget friendly. So when we looked at this challenge, we said, okay, that changes our network architecture dramatically. This really gives us an opportunity, because at the time, we only had one core supplier providing network technology or connectivity infrastructure to all of our stakeholders. And we knew that in order to bring change and significant change to our stakeholders and the community overall, we had to find a way to attract competition, to spark competition, to be interested in investing in Windsor, Essex. And so we were very happy to report that we were successful in this manner. And we didn't do it on our own. This was a collaborative effort, across other municipalities. But basically, since 2016, that effort triggered an investment of over $200 million in broadband infrastructure for the region. And then the side benefit of that, so we had a major national player decide, okay, we're making the decision. We are going to seriously expand our fiber footprint in the Windsor Essex area. And as a result of that, the local carriers had to respond. They recognized that, okay, well, if we're not doing the same thing, if we're not improving our technological capabilities and expanding our technological footprint, we're going to get eaten up alive by the national carrier that is expanding throughout Windsor Essex. So we're really happy with the results. We know that this has made significant impact across the region, but we also know there's still lots of the region that needs coverage too. So go ahead, Sean. And finally, now I'll take just a quick snapshot into the future. So as I mentioned a couple times now, networking technology and providing connectivity, this is our core competency. But now we're really seeing security and privacy as just as important as connectivity. Security and privacy are really two sides of the same coin, and our mandate has been to bring broadband throughout the region, and that mandate is now growing to bring secure broadband throughout the region. What we connect, we must protect. So our future has us building up our cybersecurity profile. We're working to build a knowledge center that will help us share valuable processes and best practices. How do businesses of any size, small, medium to large businesses, what are the things they need to be doing to keeping their data secure and keeping their users' information private? And this is an effort of an intelligent community, and CWE will continue to act in the manner of an intelligent community. So I think, you know, I've given you this big broad picture of what CWE has been actively engaged in for over 20 plus years. I think you know, if there's one key message I'd like you to take away is understanding that, you know, our core competency is connectivity and the various technologies, and we continue to learn as new technologies are available. We're not just fiber experts. We've got significant wireless plans and now looking into significant satellite plans. And we even use the point-to-point aerial offering that's available as well. If I could have, some things I'd like this committee to consider. If there's a preferred choice of continuing to expand broadband across Tecumseh, and then of course I always speak in half of the region, is to promote the notion of broadband as a municipally owned utility. And we brought this notion forward across the municipalities back in through the spring, summer, and late 2019. And if I could do that all over again, I would do it very differently than our initial approach. We weren't able to get the traction the way we thought we could. And you know, I'll take ownership of that. Hindsight's 2020. But it's always the preferred choice. And we've got some really excellent examples that we could share in the future. Matter of fact, there's one here in Ontario, the Niagara region. They have a municipally owned broadband infrastructure, and they're having great success with it. And there's some other cities across America that have done the same thing. And we'd really like to engage with those people and introduce them into the conversations. But that takes a lot of money. That takes a lot of effort to do as well. And it's not necessarily any faster than working with suppliers. So as you engage suppliers to help you assist in getting broadband to underserved areas, one of the things you always want to be asking them is, are they participating in all of the funding that's available? So, you know, our federal governments and our provincial governments have recognized the importance of broadband. We support the letter that was written by the Ontario Wardens Caucus requesting the funds to get support to continue to build out the infrastructure. It absolutely makes sense. But always be asking the suppliers, are you participating in all the funding that's available? And have them commit to the hard work. The suppliers love to cherry pick, you know, so if there's an opportunity for them to get some money to help them do what they want to do, they'll tell you right away where they want to go. But you've got to keep their feet real close to the fire and say, that's fantastic. And what about this? And what about this? And what about this? You can get them to commit to it, but you've got to bring their feet to the fire. They're not going to just offer it up. And I'm just going to make an assumption here. I'm going to presume that everyone is familiar with the SWIFT model, Southwestern Integrated Fiber Technology. This is an agency that's been active now since prior to 2016. CWE was very active members in the early days of SWIFT. Our former CEO was a board member with SWIFT. I sat on the advisory committee with SWIFT through 2016, 17, and 18. And the SWIFT model is an excellent model because it does provide long-term competition. And the key differentiator between SWIFT and just working directly with the suppliers, of course, SWIFT provides some funding, but they also tell the carriers that the network has to be an open access network. Now, that's a very, very important point here, because that means after it's constructed, any carrier can provide service on that network. And that's what's going to drive competitive service and competitive pricing on that network. That's very, very important. Otherwise, if we can't use the SWIFT model and you have to use the supplier model, you then have, like what I have where I am in LaSalle, because I actually have 3 service providers at my residence. So I have access to the internet from Bell Fiber, I have access with MNSI Fiber, and I have access with Cogeco Coax Copper. So that's a heck of a lot of investment for all of these single residents. I really prefer the SWIFT model, where there's going to be one chunk of infrastructure that's brought in, but everyone has an opportunity to sell on top of that model. And then finally, if you're awarding carriers with the opportunity to increase their business footprints across our region, we ask them to participate in our internet exchange point. And not to get too deep into that technology, but essentially an internet exchange point is where these networks meet one another, and this becomes a security advantage. When networks meet one another, that means local traffic stays local. Today, when we use the internet, we are ricocheted through a number of different internet exchange points. So for the sake of illustration, if I'm on the MNSI network and you're on a Bell network and I want to send you an email, that email actually transverses throughout the United States. So it would actually leave my office here. It would go up through Detroit, over to Chicago, around to Buffalo, over to New York, make its way over to Toronto, and then finally back to Windsor. Now that happens at the speed of light. We don't really notice any speed degradation. But the point is, once that data travels into the United States, there is no law that protects the security of that data. And so that can be made visible to any network infrastructure that it travels through. So again, long story short, when we're rewarding or awarding our carriers with business to expand their footprints in our region, and especially if you're going to RFP process, participate in the internet exchange point as one of the key criteria to being awarded the business. Sean, if you want to move on here. So that concludes everything I wanted to talk about. So I'll hand the floor back to the chair, and then I'll address any questions anyone may have.
Well, thank you, Dan. I certainly just learned a lot, and you've even piqued my interest a little bit more on a couple points. But I'll open the floor to the members of the committee. Should anyone have some questions for Dan or comments? Dan.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for Dan on the presentation here. It's definitely coming through that you do have a lot of significant local knowledge and intimate knowledge on the technology and specifically the problems that we're facing here. And I think I'll start with something that this committee has set out to do is provide recommendations to the township. And I guess my question is, out of the vast tool bag and like I said, significant local knowledge that you had presented us with, how do you see yourself and your organization assisting in us establishing an action plan as to how we want to address the problems in our town? That's number one. And I have some points. I'm a Starlink user myself. I don't necessarily think that the system is scalable. I've looked in depth at it as it stands right now. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that things will only get better from here. I would like to hear more about your endeavors with TELUS and the internet packages that you had negotiated on behalf of those 400 families, I should say. Specifically interested in the speeds, any caps that were associated to that, price points, right? Because with TELUS's sort of pervasive presence in our area, right, that will become a very much feasible endeavor short term for us. I think, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself from a technical standpoint, the broadband as a municipally owned utility makes a lot of sense. And I think, it is in the area's best interest to enlarge this fiber footprint. Yet we have a lot to go to get to that point. And we have in our area quite a number of large, I want to call them black spots here, that have absolutely horrendous coverage by any standards you want to gauge that by. So back to you. And again, thank you for the presentation.
So you've asked a lot of different chunks of questions, so I'll just walk through to make sure I understand everything that you're asking me, and I'll do my best to address each one of them. So one was, how can CWE help to address the problem? And I know you've already begun the process with CIRA to identify where, let's call them the dark zones, as you mentioned them. And that would have been the first thing I would have suggested. Hey, how do you identify where it's significantly underserved? And start with that. Secondly, I believe that the town of Tecumseh is pretty engaged with Bell and MNSI, and they are they're expanding their fiber footprint throughout the area. So if there's opportunities to continue to re-engage with them and ask them, okay, you're doing a great job here, what about here? How do we get here? And what can you do to entice them, to get them to, where it's hard, where there's no density in population? Because it's hard for them. Any business person would say the same thing. How do I make a return on investment when I got to travel 10 kilometers to do 5 people, but I can travel 10 kilometers over here and do 500 people? And so that was the point I had mentioned earlier. When you award them with that opportunity to expand, get them to commit to the hard work as well. So, in my mind, that ship has never sails away. There's always an opportunity to re-engage with them. So I would tell you to just, open up that door and ask them to help again. How CWE can help with that is, again, I know every one of these people that are engaged in this, and sometimes they may introduce some different people, but I'd be more than happy to engage in any of those discussions, engage in any of those negotiations. The one technique that CWE was able to use to attract the competition is, again, with our 200 plus locations, we had valuable business to go and attract competitors to. And so what we were able to do is say, okay, we know that this is significant dollars in infrastructure, so we can commit to longer term agreements. So we acted as anchor tenants. So typically, when you do these types of negotiations, these terms are 2 years, maybe 3 years. We did 5 years and sometimes up to 10 years. That 5 years is coming, we're approaching the 4th year. So our plan in 2022 is to go back to market again with all of these sites and say, hey, we want to renegotiate again. Here's the areas you covered for us fantastically. Here's the areas that are still not covered as well. How do we get here? And so we could certainly leverage our demand as part of any negotiations you may have going on in the future, depending on when you have them going on in the future. And then with TELUS and the effort to get the services to 400 different families, and it wasn't just TELUS providing the service across those 400 families. We got services to what we call families on net. So where they had infrastructure to their premise, but they may have been an underprivileged family. And so the cost of connectivity was prohibitive. And this is where Cogeco was an excellent partner. They gave us special pricing through a pandemic period, and then agreed to extend that pricing. So, we were buying 180, 190 different connections on a month-by-month basis. No carrier ever wants to do that kind of work. They want a 2-year commitment, a 3-year commitment, sort of thing. But we said, listen, nobody knows what things are going to be like during this pandemic. What can we do? These are underprivileged families. How do we help them? Pardon me. So they really came, they really helped a lot. And we had services as low as $35 a month for them. Those were very unique circumstances, very unique pricing, not what we typically see. TELUS was not as flexible in their negotiations. And again, I really can't blame them, but they did provide with us a high number of, like those, well, basically hotspots, mobile hotspots. But again, they were getting pressured right across the entire country. So it wasn't just us, we were getting this wireless connectivity to off-net. And so we were saying, hey, how many of those hotspot devices do you have? Well, we've got about 250. All right, we'll take them. Well, 150 are already spoken for. Who spoke for them? Today's the day the announcement, the lockdown was made. Who got to you first? Well, TELUS is a national carrier right across the country. So they weren't as forgiving in pricing, but they did come to the call as we needed them. And then again, Dan, you talked about your support for municipally owned broadband. Again, there's a tremendous amount of advantage to that. It's not inexpensive to do, but it is the long-term value, in my estimation, really exceeds the short-term, some of the pain. But, and I don't know what the intention of this committee is here. Do you need to get connectivity quickly to those that are underserved, or can you take your time and wait for infrastructure to get there? Because if you need to do it quickly, whether it's municipally owned or you work with a carrier, the timeline is the timeline. I think I covered everything, Dan.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Dan. And I think the goal of the committee is to address the here and now as well as the long term, right? We find ourselves with many underserved areas, many people that in Canada in 2021 have to drive to Tim Hortons parking lots to do exams and things along these lines, which frankly I find unacceptable in a civilized country such as ours for this to happen. So we have a tremendous task in front of us. We want to establish an action plan, both short-term as well as long-term. And while I personally see the value of the broadband as a municipally owned utility, Councillor Jobin has pointed out that there are areas that have even more primary needs, such as water and things along these lines, right? Which sometimes conflict with these initiatives. However, I think this being deemed as a utility by the CRTC, right, and the need of it being very, very acute in this pandemic, right, we need to devise as a committee an action plan that we can present to the township that they can act on and support the people of the town of Tecumseh here. So that's what we're trying to do, and I think feedback from folks such as yourself and the organization you represent is invaluable to us. And I personally would like to continue the conversation and see how we can, assist the committee in reaching this action plan that we can then present on behalf of the committee to the township for action. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor McNamara, you had your hand up.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Houston. I know some members of the committee don't realize I am the chair of SWIFT, the Southwestern Integrated Fiber Technology. as well as the warden of Essex County, and I sit on the caucus for the Western Ontario Wards Caucus. And what Dan was saying was, I certainly concur with them. There's been a lot of movement in the last, I would say about the last 8 weeks, and there are things right now I can't share with you because I had to sign an NDR with the Ministry of Infrastructure. But what I can tell you is that the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus and SWIFT as the chair, and the chair, George Cornell, the warden of Simcoe County, we sent a letter to the minister and basically telling her to release the maps of the 15 counties of what the first tranche of that $4 billion provincial investment. All I can tell you is that if I had the map right here of Essex County, you guys would be very pleased with what's coming down the pipe. And that's about as far as I can go. In terms of the SWIFT piece, obviously moving forward, we've been able to, through investments with the provincial federal government in that program and the municipal contributions, put up close to 300 million within our jurisdiction, and included in that a little bit in Windsor. They're not part of the counties, but they're there, Niagara region, Caledon, and Kitchener-Waterloo area. And in their wisdom, they're moving on to a different program, obviously. For us, we have 96 contracts that are now all initiated. And in the various areas, we have Lighthouse Cove's an example, and some of Goshfield South are being utilized. And our executive director is guiding the Goshfield group in Peely Island, which is going to be a $20 million investment to Peely. Those dark spots that Dan and the rest of them have been saying, it's an antiquated hexagon model of CRTC that should be thrown out. And for us to be able to deal with SWIFT, we had some power, I guess you could say, to direct the ISPs in the areas where, as Dan alluded to, they cherry pick. And the one thing that SWIFT was adamant from the get-go, fiber, number one. Wireless, if it's absolutely the only humanly possible thing that you can do. And we've been able to accomplish that. The other good success that we've had is we've been able to contract out small and medium ISPs, not all the big boys. The big boys, in my opinion, will take the easy route and will try to push as much wireless as they can in doing so. And so we've been pretty successful with co-ops and really localized small ISPs that the owners, some of it is owned by the residents, on different co-ops, and that model's worked well. And out of the 300 million, about 57% of the contracts that were given out are to the small medium ISPs. Now moving forward, what the province is doing is the first tranche for us, and it's roughly about 800 million for Southwestern Ontario. That's and with that, I know exactly how much you want to spend in the county, but I can't even tell you that answer. But what they're doing is they're basically setting up an auction block, and they say, okay, this is what we want you to do, and it's called like a reverse auction and in the RFP. So the ISPs then bid on those contracts. And so they know, and the only difference that I find where the SWIFT model was so good is that out of that 300 million, we got the ISPs to contribute almost a third of that money. So they had skin in the game. And so we'll see how this, the RFPs or RFQ, when they do come in. But I can tell you, we do have some concerns, but we're trying to address that directly with the Minister and Infrastructure Ontario. So I say stay tuned. I'm hoping by the time we meet again, is that we'll have access to all those maps. But I can tell you, there's some counties in southwestern Ontario are going to be extremely happy, and we're one of them. And there's going to be counties in southwestern Ontario are going to be pissed. And so there's a combination of things and so forth. So with that, a lot of what Dan was certainly bringing forward to the table, and that is something that SWIFT has been trying to tackle. Now, SWIFT at the end, and in the Western Ontario Wards Caucus, at the end, really don't care who delivers, just deliver. That's the whole premise that we've been at. And the only reason why we exist as a group is that at the beginning, is that there was very little interest from the province and the federal government in dealing with the issue of delivering broadband into small and rural Ontario and small communities. The pandemic really heightened that. Mm-hmm. So if there's anything good that's going to come out of the pandemic, that's one of them, because they realize now moving forward that people are leaving Toronto and the GTA and they're moving into smaller communities. And in order for them to continue to do their work and their business or start new business, education, school, the kids, all of that, they need broadband. Farming is another great example, and we've been saying it all along, is farming is not traditional anymore. Mm-hmm. They need access to broadband and so forth. Just on their equipment they run, the dairy farms that they run, everything's electronic and so forth. And so I say stay tuned. I can't even share it with my own council. I can't even go as the warden to county council. I can't even go in camera to tell them the whole picture until the province tells us we can do it. But what I told you is about as much as I can tell you in terms of the idea. But they are committed and spending a lot of money. Now it's our job and this committee and others and people like Dan and the rest to make sure they spend it in the right place. And so what we're trying to convince everyone is spread the wealth. Competition is good. It's not only getting access to your home, but you want to make sure it's affordable going moving forward. And that is another issue that Western Wardens have sent letters with the big city mayors that to control the high cost of broadband. And so one of the better ways of doing that too as well is competition. And that's why SWIFT felt very strongly that the smaller players needed to have access. And so I've said enough, but certainly me personally, I'm pleased with what they're indicating they're going to do for us. And it's basically every household in the county. I can tell you that much. Every household.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that, Mayor McNamara, and I guess we will stay tuned to when those announcements come out, and it certainly sounds promising, and so we will wait for those. Any other members have a question for, yes, Darren?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one question for Dan. You mentioned about your internet exchange point and your the IXPs and pushing the ISPs when you're dealing with them as far as having something a little more local and staying out of, as you mentioned, the Chicago and the New Yorks and Buffaloes and stuff. Have you made headway with that? Have you talked to the ISPs? Is there some sort of interest by them in having something a little more local, or at least in Ontario?
Yes, we have. So we have agreements in principle, if you will. So in my office here in downtown Windsor, we have funded the equipment required to allow these networks to meet one another. And the local carriers have agreed in principle to participate. And so we will be continuing to advocate, and actually what we're working to do now is really set up a board around that, and then get them to bring their connectivity into the facility, and our local carriers will be participating.
So you're looking at establishing that yourself in this area?
Correct.
Right, okay.
And our agency, typically there are internet exchange points set up all around the world. And so the number one internet exchange point in Canada is 151 Front Street, Toronto. You'll often hear this called that 151 Front Street. And that's where networks like Microsoft connects, and that's where Facebook network connects, and that's where Amazon networks connect. And that's how they see all of the internet networks that provide services to our homes. So that's essentially what the internet exchange point does, right? So what we want to do, and CIRA is the organization that's really pushing this, they want to create a Canadian-based network. The internet began in the United States. So us being a border town, the easiest way to bring internet to us here was through the tunnel. As a matter of fact, we have fiber, CWE has fiber that runs through the tunnel all the way up through Michigan to Sault Ste. Marie and connects all the way back down to 151 Front Street. It's part of closing the ring of the internet to our region so that it's resilient. So that if the main fiber that comes from downtown Toronto, you know, for the sake of discussion down the 401, if that severs for some reason, we have another ring of connection. So no user, you'd never know that something happened in one and the other one's taking over. So yeah, we definitely want to advocate for the internet exchange point. And anytime that you're offering any of these carriers opportunities for business, then hey, participate in it. You need to participate in the internet exchange point. Ask them to participate. I'll be candid with you right now. Bell will never do it because they have them. Their network is all over the place, so there's no need for them to do it. But we ask them every time anyway. I always put the pressure on them. So.
Thank you. Aldo.
Hi, guys. Thanks, Dan, for that information. Just a quick question with respect to the Niagara region. From concept to completion, are you aware of what the timeline was like for them to do that?
They actually started their network infrastructure the same time that we started ours over 20 years ago. So I want to say from concept to completion was in the 15-year mark. And then it's never really completed because you're always expanding it. The difference between what the Niagara region did versus what we did here. So, this is before my time, so I may not have all of the facts absolutely accurate, but the gist of it is this: we were building this infrastructure and the intention was to continue to expand the infrastructure. So you think about a tree, you've got a trunk, you've got branches, then you got smaller branches, and you just keep growing this tree, right? So that gets very, very costly. And I think we ended up in some cost overruns. And a Cogeco, a Rogers, a TELUS, a Bell, they sniffed this stuff out. And so they approached the lead participating organization at the time. It wasn't CWE. We were the benefactors of it, but there was a different board of directors that was running it. They approached them and said, hey, do you want to sell the network? And they said, yeah. They did the exact same thing to Niagara. So Niagara was growing the same network in the same process, the same methodology we were. And they approached them and said, hey, do you want to sell your network? And they said, no. Now, one of the municipalities did, and it wasn't that long ago that they did it. They decided, okay, we've had enough of this. It's time for us to get out of it and let it become the work of private sector. But two of the Niagara municipalities hung on to it. And the real advantage to that is future cost containment. One subject that I didn't even talk about in today's session, because it's a ton of discussion all by itself, is when we start talking about smart city initiatives. And in a nutshell, smart city initiatives are about sensors collecting data, and then this data becomes available to the public sector. And now we start making informed decisions on how do we make improvements using data modeling to get us there. And so we see, I belong in all kinds of different committees on these smart city initiative committees, and we see the activity of the work that's going on, and it's extremely valuable. But if you are at the mercy of the carriers to provide that infrastructure of moving that sensor data around, well, they have the liberty of charging what they want. We explored an opportunity with Bell at one time, and the example that was given was they could put a SIM card. I think I'm going to presume that everyone's familiar with what a SIM module looks like. That's what we have in our mobile phones. It's a SIM card that's what activates the phone on the network. So they could put these SIM cards in every single fire hydrant across the region, right? So they have the locking module that goes on a fire hydrant. They've got a special one there that could receive the SIM card, and that would become a connected fire hydrant. And basically you would have knowledge of when that fire hydrant was used, the condition that it's in, is it ever leaking? So instead of having somebody drive around to do physical inspection of them, are they in proper working order? You would know through a sensor that, hey, this thing is leaking, and then you would send somebody out to do the appropriate repair. But their connectivity charge for that was $30 a month per fire hydrant. Well, that's, you can do a return on investment on that one there. Might be a little hard at $30 a month, but if you had that infrastructure yourself, it certainly wouldn't be $30 a month. And here's what gets really interesting about when you put a SIM card in a fire hydrant, because a SIM card does two main things. It tells you a piece of information because it talks to the network, but it also receives information, right? So suddenly now your fire hydrants can count traffic if you want them to. Suddenly now your fire hydrants can connect cell phones if you wanted them to. You certainly do all kinds of different things with them. And again, that's why I didn't bring it up at this thing. It's a whole other discussion all by itself. But again, when you've got ownership in that infrastructure yourself, you've got cost containment, and you've got opportunities to bring some advancements to towns, municipalities. The agriculture industry is a whole other thing all by itself, and their needs. I hope I didn't over answer the question.
No, Mayor, yeah, go ahead.
I just very quickly want to add, one of the things I didn't add is folks will have to be patient too, because the world supply of fiber is very, very difficult. The ISPs right now are having a hard time sourcing. Mm-hmm. And there's the other factor, the contractors to put it in the ground, and the locators like the GTELs of the world. Yeah. And as you know, MNSI, they were tired of waiting, so they just bought Extreme Drilling. And so, but that's the reality that we're faced with, because on SWIFT, there's a set contract that they've got to finish by X, and they're finding out now they can't get the fiber or the amount of fiber that they need. Those who we've learned early and went to the ISPs and said, look, before you get all your engineering and everything, order your material now, and we're paying them up front so they can get the material, but they're having a long wait to get it. So that's going to be an issue. And it's not only Southwestern Ontario that wants fiber, it's the whole country, United States, around the world. And so we might have to be a little patient too, just sourcing out material.
So if I could just add on to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
You're absolutely right, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I talked about, we gave extended terms to the carriers that we worked with. So we're 3 years into our agreement of servicing and actually bringing redundant services. We will have the most connected public sector group of sites in anywhere in Ontario. So we're 3 years into those 5-year terms, and we're still connecting some locations because of exactly what you're talking about. There's been a shortage of fiber, been a shortage of workforce, and then again, the locators, I don't know what happened to that group, but they just, I don't know, they just left town or what, you know, the biggest dollar is buying them. And I think there's only 20 of them across the country. I don't know what it is.
You could blame the previous government for that one, because that's something AMO told them that someday you're going to get caught. And
Yeah.
here we are.
Yeah. So that brings the, you know, that again, I'll just go back to, that's one of the reasons we said we need to be testing the Starlink service. It's an opportunity that it's now available in the area. It's certainly not the best, and fiber to the premise would always be the preferred choice. But for a short-term solution in very, very rural areas, we believe it to be a viable solution. Across our stakeholder group, our public sector stakeholder group, we see us using it as a redundant service, so that if we have a fiber cut at the premise, the facility is not shut down. They're not dead in the water. They'll have this fiber uplink or the satellite uplink that will keep their mission critical applications like security alarm systems, telephone systems, and main computers. So I'm really talking about the elementary and the secondary schools here, so that their primary mission critical applications are still active.
Okay. Any other questions from the group? I think we're good. Dan, certainly appreciate your time, all the information. I learned a lot, and you know, I did write down the Technovation for my girls. I've got, you know, two girls myself in grade 6 and 7. While you did the presentation, I popped online to get an email reminder of when that registration is open, because that program sounds quite interesting. So I'll be enrolling my girls in that, and that sounds great. So
And maybe we'll see you as a mentor as well. Who knows?
Who knows, right? I'll see how my schedule allows for time. But yeah, no, that sounds great. And if we have any other questions, it's great to know that you are there as a resource to help kind of guide us along the way. And should any of the members of the committee, you know, have any questions, it's great to know that we've got somebody like you here in the community and everything that you've done. So thank you for coming out and spending your time with us this evening.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you.
Have a great evening, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you. We will move on here to communication. So we do have the minutes from July 14th on the agenda. I believe everyone has had an opportunity to review and look that over. So if I can get a motion to accept those. Tanya and Dan. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Moving on to reports. We do have a report from Director of Information and Communication Services of the SIRA speed test campaign. So Sean, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we did have some takeaways from our first meeting. This was one of them, was the engaging SIRA after Grant's presentation in July. So we did set up an account for SIRA for the speed test challenge and launched it pretty much right after our first meeting. If you look at the report here, we can follow along. So we registered the domain name speed test, Tecumseh speedtest.ca. And at that point, just went out through the media, and we saw the data points starting to come in. And then over the course of the summer, up until I checked earlier this week, we're coming up around 400 tests. Some of those were duplicate tests, so there might not be 400 unique tests, but we did have 400 tests across the town. And Grant did send us just to see how the map's kind of filling in. This was an original map when they started this program back in 2015. So this is how many dots or how many points they had up until 2018. And then from then till about the end of 2020, you can see it starting to fill in a bit. And then year to date this year, you can see that we've gained quite a few points just since we've launched this campaign back in July. So we did promise to get out in the media, which we did. The postcard took a little more time to get out, and I tried to kill two birds with one stone with advocating for our Tecumseh alert system on the backside, which is something we've wanted to do as well. So they hit all the mailboxes in Maidstone and Oldcastle last week, and they went out today for wards 1 through 4 for the Tecumseh post office. So you should be seeing, anybody in wards 1 through 4 should be seeing the postcard in your mailboxes by the end of the week. And that was for those of you that are viewing from home, this is what you can expect in your mailbox. And this is something that the committee already has seen on their agenda. So I think Grant has all kinds of data that he's sending me on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. He's really on top of what's coming in, and he's going to slice and dice this data in many directions for us, which is great. And it'll help us, as the mayor alluded to, and Dan from Connecting Windsor Essex. The more data we have of these dark spots, the better to fine tune, not these 1 kilometer honeycombs or whatever the square measurement was for those. We're getting pinpointing where our trouble spots are, and that'll be beneficial in presenting to ISPs down the road. So we'll keep the committee up to date on this endeavor. And if there's any questions on this report, I can entertain that now.
Well, thank you, Sean. I will jump out early here, and I will say thank you to Darren, because he did about an hour ago posted onto Tecumseh Comes Together. So thank you, Darren, for sharing that online. And I've done a couple tests here from my home. So I'll be in that 400 number there. But any questions for Sean on the report? Dan, go ahead.
So through you, Mr. Chair, has Sarah actually answered some of the questions that we had when they did the presentation with regards to the outliers that we found in the existing tests there? We found that one area around County Road 8 there that had like 400 some tests, and all were over 180 megabits per second. And there were no sort of explanations with regards to that.
Yes, he did follow up with that the week after in July. I have to go back and look, I'm going from memory here now, but I think their protocols or their procedures is they don't discount whether they're outliers or not. They can't take them off the map. But when we get the raw data, I have our GIS group working on a more refined map that will, for our purposes, will discount those outliers. Obviously, they're not getting 500 meg in the middle of the farm just down the road from you, Dan, and we realize that. So as long as we will continue to get the raw data from CIRA, but we have the ability, they have the X and Y, the lat and long for every test. And we'll take that, do our own analysis with our GIS group and come up with a cleaned up map. And I know I've had a few calls over the months since we launched it about difficulty in relocating up their point on the map when they do the test. Ideally, I'd like to have seen put in an address that's geocoded, and then from our side too, we have the actual address of where the test was done, so that wouldn't have happened. And I think it would have reduced the outliers, and I made that suggestion to CIRA. But in the meantime, just rest assured, we'll be looking the data a little closer before we have any presentations. And by the time all these postcards go out at our next meeting, we'll probably have some internally generated results for the committee. But yeah, good question.
Thank you.
And Sean, I do know when I had first went into the system, tested my home, it did, and I put in my postal code, it did geolocate that kind of yellow identifier right in the middle of the field. So it wasn't anywhere near my home. So when I did the second ones, I could move it, but I'm assuming that that's what happened with that one test, that I didn't know you could move that, the identifier there to, onto a street. So
We tried to put a little how-to in there for that conundrum, and I think, yeah, in GIS speak, it's the centroid of the polygon. So the polygon is the whole postal code.
Yep.
You put in the postal code, it's going to start you in the center of your postal code,
Hmm.
and then it gets you close to your house, and then you're supposed to move it from there. But like I said, if you had address, it would get it right to your address. But that's the tool that we have to use for now. But we'll take a closer look as the data continues to come in.
Yep. Any other questions for Sean? Nope. Then, sorry, I lost my agenda here. Then,
I'll move the report.
Yep.
Mr. Chair.
if we get a motion on the report from Mayor McNamara and seconded by Dan. And do we require a motion on this, or we're just,
Just to
it's
receive.
just an update, correct, Sean?
Yeah, you can move in second to receive.
Okay, yep, okay, so moved by Mayor McNamara, seconded by Dan, all in favor? Opposed? Thank you, that carries. So the second piece is another report regarding the Hydro One communication tower, and Sean, I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah, so the report, or the briefing note, again, it was a takeaway from the first meeting where I think it came up in the discussion at the meeting or with some members that there is a beacon, if you will, out in the south end of Lakeshore, and visible obviously from a lot of the rural areas of Tecumseh. That's in the Ontario Hydro lands on North Talbot. So it's a 200-foot tower that was originally used as microwave communication for infrastructure by Hydro One, or by Ontario Hydro, or back in the day. The microwave antennas have been removed, and it's just a bare tower now. So it took a good part of the summer to find the right people to talk to at Ontario Hydro, and I have two very good contacts there now that knew of the site, even though they're in the GTA. One had roots in Tecumseh and knew the area and knew the tower that I was talking about, and knew how flat Essex County was and how visible this is. So we took the drone up there at the site just to get a feel of what you could see from the site, and added some photos to the report so everybody in the committee would know the site we're talking about. So the gentlemen at Ontario Hydro have confirmed that it is under the purview of Hydro One, which was good. There was less hoops to jump through. So as recently as last week, they're continuing to provide information to the town on what it would take to accommodate any kind of lease arrangements there if an ISP did want to locate. And some of the names you've heard here tonight, I've been in contact with, and started that conversation, which was kind of one of the mandates of the committee, is to get people to the table. And I know there's network with fiber, but there's also the human networks that we all enjoy and expand upon. So to get these at the table, this is all cognizant of the mayor's or kind of what he alluded to earlier in the meeting, that there's some good news coming. But at the end of the day, 50-10 fiber in some of these concessions and very remote areas of that county, that's going to be a ways away. Even knowing that there is some grant funding coming to expand the hardwired communication. So still working on that, and still getting the players to the table. And if we can get some infrastructure on a 200-foot tower located centrally in the county. I know there's some on the screen here that can see that tower and may not be able to see others. So there would be a benefit in the rural area for that for sure. So I just wanted to just update the committee on some progress made on that initiative that we had talked about previously.
Yep. Well, thank you, Sean. Darren?
Yeah, I just had a couple questions about that, Sean. I did read the report quite extensively on what you're putting together for there. And kind of that's my background with radio towers. I work with radio towers, and some of my towers I actually rent space on to some of the local ISPs. So one of the things to consider, are you looking at like actually taking over this tower site that they're abandoning, or you're looking at just leasing some space or subleasing, or just putting the ISPs in touch with Ontario Hydro and then stepping back and letting them sort of negotiate their own deal with that?
Yeah, thanks, Darren, and through you, Mr. Chair, to Darren. It's probably the answer is both at this point. We do have point-to-point communications in the south part of the town that the municipality maintains. If we can see the water tower at the north end, we take advantage of that because we do have our infrastructure on the water tower to to communicate with Station 2 or parks out that way or SCADA nodes, etc. And there are some areas that's been in place for 15 years where the trees are growing, or, as you know, frequencies get busy and channels get busy. So we have to look at upgrading the infrastructure. So if we could bounce something off this tower that we're talking about in areas of the municipality that we can't utilize current point-to-point communication, that's something we'll definitely look at. Again, we're early in the discussion stage, but if there's a possibility for some synergies there with not only some town infrastructure being put on there, in addition to introducing, making the contacts between the ISPs and Hydro One, we could kill a couple birds here with one stone if we can get access to that tower. So I'm still waiting to get the details on what the lease arrangement will look like. Obviously, the dollars come into play, and we have that with TELUS on our water tower now with leasing space, as they do. As many of the ISPs who offer point-to-point technology, if it's not on their own infrastructure, there is always that dollar sign that comes into play, as you know as well, right? So, yeah, if anything, we can discuss offline. I'd love to tap into your expertise on this because it's not something we deal with on the private side. It's something we've done internally on the public side for the town initiatives and projects. But for sure, a discussion if you can help with that, greatly appreciated.
Yeah, certainly I would. Sorry, certainly I would. I just, one of the things I wanted to point out is that there will be, based on the fact that the tower is abandoned, hasn't been used in some time, who knows and what they're using, there definitely will be some, like a tower analysis done. Will need to be done. You'll need to have an engineering study done. Is the tower structurally sound? And then any equipment you put on there has to have wind loading analysis done of it. So any piece of equipment, a small antenna may only weigh 6 pounds. But when you put that antenna 200 feet in the air with the wind loading, it may act as a 200-pound force against that side of the tower. And the engineers will tell you, I'm certainly not into the math of doing that. But this is discussions we've had to have with these ISPs before, is who pays for that, right? Who's going to pay to do this structural analysis and have this tower, the wind loading analysis done? So it's just something to think of when you're putting these negotiations together, that there will be something that will have to be impacted as well with that. Otherwise, it's a great looking report, and it's certainly a great site to look at.
More to follow, we hope. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dan.
You, Mr. Chair, just one quick question. Is there currently any connectivity on that tower? Anything that we know about in terms of broadband connectivity? Where would this tower be fed from connectivity wise?
So through the chair to Dan, in preliminary discussions with Hydro One and with a possible interested partner, could go one of two ways. I know Bell may or may not have a fiber backbone in that area or close to that area. I know they've run some fiber up North Talbot recently, kind of a trunk or backbone, not accessible to people that pass by, but that's one. And Hydro One is looking into that because they have a telecom division that they're putting us in touch with as well to answer some of what you just asked. In addition to offering gigabit connectivity wirelessly to that tower from other points. So it might, depending on how many customers that they could get on the site on that tower, they do have point-to-point backbones, if you will, from other sites throughout the region that they could bounce off that and then offer to to the residents from there. So again, in the early stages, it has been touched upon, but a good question, a good technology question, yeah, for sure. How do we get the backbone to the site?
Thank
Or
you.
how does somebody, not us, but how do they?
I think, Mayor?
Yeah, just on that point, through you, Chair, to Sean and both. The only hesitation that I have is that when the funding comes down, and obviously Infrastructure Ontario will have a lot to say, just like we had to at SWIFT, as well as and we always took and we had no choice because the province wouldn't allow any other thing, was what is classified as being served. So I'm not 100% sure, but I would surmise that if we went in and they spent money and then they put the wireless and it's there, that could be a check mark saying you're served, and then no funding, for fiber moving forward. So I would keep that in mind first. And what I'm going to do, Sean, I'm gonna contact Barry Fields, our executive director from SWIFT, just to get a take from him. If something could be there temporarily to fix a problem, because obviously fiber, difficulty to get it, this, that, and so forth. When will it be available? And I know the province, I think they're over ambitious when they say 2025, and that's to do the whole province. And so that would be my only concern. Just keep that in mind, and then I'll try to get a hold of Barry just to get his insight, because they're pretty finicky about what's classified as CERT. That's why even we had a hard time at SWIFT at the time to get anything in Tecumseh at the time, because according to CRTC, many of our areas are served, which is baloney, and I argued that point. But that's the issue we got to face. So I would say just let's make sure that we line up all the ducks in a row here to make sure that it doesn't hurt us down the road.
Yeah, I guess through you, Mr. Chair, just supplementary to that. And I, as with all of you on the screen here, I'm learning as we go as well. So just keep that in mind. But when I hear served, I'm thinking 50-10, which is hard to achieve with wireless. Even 10, you're paying $100 for 10. Yeah. 10 right now and getting 6. So I don't know that, and I'd be interested to see what Barry says, and we will follow up on that for sure through your work.
Maybe I'll get you on that call with him.
Okay.
John, listen, we're all learning as we go along here, so there's a lot of stuff happening very quickly, and tell you the truth, I don't think the government knows it all.
Yeah. And I think when the question was posed, sorry, through your chair, Mr. Chair, back to the mayor, the question came up earlier in the meeting, and I think one of the committee members answered, are you looking for a short-term fix or are you looking for a long-term plan? And I think the answer was both, which is good. So I think that's, if I look back at the terms of reference for this committee, and I'd like to turn back, and I've heard action plan tonight too, and I'd like to get into that discussion quickly, but it is a Band-Aid. But it's a quick win, but it's not the ultimate solution to be deemed as served. But definitely a call to learn more about what the word served means, and not cutting off our nose to spite our face if we do all these great initiatives and get some people hooked up, and then, like you say, get a tick in the checkbox, and we're limiting ourselves down the road.
A good point from that, Mr. Chair, to Sean was the Pelee Island. Pelee Island at the very beginning, the ISPs were not interested in fiber at all. Zippo, they just wanted to have a tower, wireless, and call it a day. So we're working with the federal government, working with IRIC. We got the 20 million, and they're going to put a redundancy system there with 2 cables underwater, and so it'd be full fiber on the island. So it's not a temporary fix, and then, so they were able to convince, and then it was the local ISP that ended up getting the contract. But the bottom line is that the big players said, no, we're not interested in putting fiber there. There's only, was it 50 households or 300 households or whatever it is. It's not worth it for us. And that's why it's $20 million for that little island.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jobin.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, to the committee. Sean, I just want to thank you for everything you've done for this committee thus far, with the campaign, for sure, last report, and then this report with the drone and all the additional trying to connect, not just literally through broadband, but with all the different groups and parties to advocate for our community. And there are definitely some beautiful families living around the tower that you disclosed, that you showed us this evening. So I do want to thank you for that, everything that you're doing. And you have been advocating for our community and broadband for a long time, not just since this committee has formed. So I want to thank you for all of that you've done. So on this report, if you need a mover to receive, Brian, I will for sure move to receive.
Okay, thank you, Tanya. And a seconder, Darren. All in favor? Opposed? Yeah. So that carries. And that takes us to unfinished business, which we have none, and any new business. Tanya and Darren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's actually second to what Dan Grossu said earlier. Gary gave us some news that we're going to be advancing. So I just feel like, what are we going to do as a committee going forward? Are we going to be patient? Is that the wish of this committee? Or are we going to form some type of resolution or letter? Or are we just going to be patient and wait for our next meeting? What are the wishes here of all of us here tonight?
Mayor McNamara.
If I can make a suggestion, Tanya, absolutely. Be patient to a limit, just like a parent, right? You're patient for a little bit and then not so patient, but just stay tuned. I really believe when we're able to share, and then SWIP is working hand in glove with Western Wardens right now, and we've tied in with the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus as well. And we will need the help of this committee as well as the town, our peers across the county, and so forth, to make sure that whatever they deliver, it's the right solution. And so if we think they're going in the wrong direction in certain areas, then we need to be vocal about it. We shouldn't accept anything less than in my opinion, fiber and the 50-10. The 50-10 to me is the bare bone minimum. We should be stressing for 1 gig, and so I say stay tuned. I mean, things are gonna, I think, eventually start ramping up pretty quick, but as quickly as they can get material and contracts being exercised. But the province wants all this done by 2025. So be patient, but in the same token, let's keep building the information, and at the end of the day, we want the best for our community. We deserve no less, right?
Right. Dan, you had your hand up.
So just adding a bit more, I think, to what Councillor Jobin said and Mayor McNamara, I think the goal of the committee is to make recommendation to the township, right? And we have short-term problems and long-term problems, and we want to be cognizant of, for lack of better terminology, not shooting ourselves in the foot here, and getting that check mark and stating that we're served But in the meantime, we have to keep in mind, that this is a lingering problem, a day-to-day problem, and it's getting more and more critical. And I echo Councilor Jobin's thanks to Sean for all the work he's doing. I think at this point, as new business, what I would want to get to, and Sean has alluded to that as well, is how do we devise an action plan, a short-term action plan as well as a long-term action plan, right? And I think a number of considerations that we need to bring forth is how can the township assist in a short-term plan? And I think this endeavor with researching the tower is certainly a worthwhile one. And then, what Mayor McNamara has pointed out is that we need not compromise on 50-10 because that is definitely the bare minimum. And this will not take us into the future as a township, right? So we need to keep our eye on the ball with regards to fiber in all the wards in our township. So in my humble opinion here, and this is what I would like to propose as new business, is how do we establish a short-term and a long-term action plan? And short of doing a happy dance here when Mayor McNamara had disclosed some things to us, I just wanted to find out if at any point in time now or at a later point in time, he can share with us some sort of a timeline as far as our local area is concerned and the developments therein. I understood that that may not be possible right now, but even if possible before we meet, I think that's something we ought to take into consideration. And again, I am calling for putting together a short-term as well as a long-term plan that we can present to council.
Sean? Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, thank you, Dan, for that. Direction is always good, and that's what I'm looking for exactly from the committee tonight on how to proceed. Obviously, the two reports that were presented earlier are two that we will continue to work on between now and the next meeting and report on. If you recall this, the signpost from Dan Cercelli's presentation earlier, that's kind of where we're at tonight. This way, that way, upside down, left, right. So there are some initiatives on there. So as far as a short-term and a long-term action plan goes, I do have some examples from other municipalities across the province of which came out of their rural broadband committees or their connectivity committees. So I can have a look at those to start getting a draft plan together for short and long term. All that keeping in mind what's going on with announcements. We can continue with the low-hanging fruit of collecting data, partnering with some Band-Aid solutions or some interim solutions, short-term solutions. Continue to work on that, which will all be part of those plans. I just want to know the first choice on there. It's come up a few times tonight. Is there any appetite to pursue a municipally owned utility? That is one of the options, in addition to all these other ones we've talked about. But are we going to give that any consideration going down the road? There's enough other things on the plate here, and I can do it. But if it's a non-starter, I'd rather not waste all of our time. So. Through your chair, that's one comment I had. I'll add that to my list if it's something the committee so chooses.
I mean, yes, it's one of those items which it isn't currently a budgeted item, right? And as we did hear before, there's certainly some advantages, right? Cost not being one of them, but and Mayor, you would maybe be better to talk to this specifically, right? But I would think with the announcements and seeing the progression in the community that we have had from our private ISPs. For the municipality to step in and say, hey, we're going to kind of, thank you, but we're going to take it from here. It's unbudgeted, not something that has been on the radar, but Mayor, maybe I'll let you
Well,
comment.
for me, if it was like 3, 4, 5 years ago, I would have said, yeah, let's investigate this. I know, with Essex Power, there was talk back in the day of doing fiber, and then we said no, only because the difficulty is that it's like electricity. It's like you have to be embedded with somebody, and you heard Dan earlier, pretty hard dealing with the Bells of the world and the rest of them, and what are the costs to share the backbones or develop them and so forth. If it's more regionally, if it would be like, Windsor and Essex County and so forth, to me, it makes more sense because there's more synergies and certainly more abilities to do it. But with how Swift has been successful in putting out broadband to 67,000 homes, or 60, at least the cables in front of 67,000 homes, it's pretty remarkable in itself. And now the amount of money the province is putting out, which 5 years ago, it was nothing. And we all know that. Now there's $4 billion, and the feds just tapped in another billion on theirs. So there's $2 billion there. There's still a lot more money to go in that. Your own utility and developing it and maintaining it and adding new technologies, moving along. We're only 24,000, and to me, it's a huge undertaking. And I'm more in a position now, like I said, from 5 years ago to where I am now, looking at what's transpiring again with all those investments, what 2025 will bring. You're not seeing too many municipalities. There's some, but you don't see too many of them running to that because of, I know the difficulties even running a local distribution company. We were embedded with Hydro One, and there's issues, and certainly moving forward. So, for me personally, I'm only one person on the committee, but I say it's premature at this stage.
Okay, thank you.
Aldo and Darren.
Just a quick question. I'm very confident that the committee can make something happen, but if people can't ultimately afford the service that we get to their homes, is it outside the scope of this committee to look at subsidies or how that's going to be handled or addressed for those that can't afford it?
I can try to answer that, although this is the reason why the SWIFT and the big city mayors, the Western Ontario Wards Caucus, the Eastern Ontario Wards Caucus have sent letters for that purpose, that affordability on connection is critical for the success of first of all, investing all of that money. And I understand where you're coming from, and the leadership on all those groups agree with your statement that affordability is a huge role. In my opinion, also, the best way to drive that is competition. And I've noticed it even myself here with MNSI. I've had Cogeco, I've had Bell, I've had them all. But with MNSI and so forth, the more you get, the more competitive they are. And so we need to certainly drive that. But we have to put pressure on the federal government and onto the CRTC. And to give you an example, small ISPs, one of them is called Tecumseh. You've probably heard of them. They're doing the work in Lighthouse Cove. Tech Savvy is a small player in the game, but they're very good. And for them to tie into a lot of the networks, the big ones like Bell, CRTC said, okay, you know what? We're going to discount that cost for those to connect. And well, that went for about 2 years, and it was signed on. And then CRTC were lobbied hard by the Bells of the world, and they said, no, you can't do that. We're developing, we're paying for it, and they should pay for it. So CRTC, here they are, they changed their mind. Well, Tecumseh's up in arms, obviously, because now it creates difficulty for the smaller players. And so we've got to continue to lobby. And I would highly recommend that this committee makes a recommendation that we do everything that we can to continue to lobby to make sure that prices for internet is attainable and achievable for everyone. Because we know that this is a necessity. It's not a luxury anymore. We've seen it during the pandemic. Every household is dependent on connection in order for them to go to, for schooling, for everything. And so we need to continue to lobby very hard.
I think Darren first, then Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just through you back to Councillor Jobin's original question. I just kind of wanted to echo the sentiments of Mayor McNamara in my thoughts as far as, pushing towards town-owned infrastructure and putting this utility in. And I think, Mayor McNamara hit it right on the head in the fact of the cost. And as you mentioned, Mr. Chair, with this being an unbudgeted item, not having the funds budgeted to put towards something like this, but on also what Mayor McNamara has mentioned as far as the cost to maintain something like this. Equipment changes so rapidly in a network. It's tens of thousands of millions per year, even in equipment that would have to be looked at in order to maintain this. And as was mentioned in Dan's earlier presentation, the big ISPs have come in and cherry picked, as he said, the easy work, the larger community, the larger areas of the community. So for instance, in my neighborhood, we have, as you mentioned, Bell run down the street, MNSI's run right to my home, the Cogeco's run right to my home. So if the town were to come along and put in yet another infrastructure in my home, I can't see my neighborhood saying, oh, let's all move over to the town's infrastructure. We've signed contracts with these other ones. So I think the cost would be extremely prohibitive to even look at right now. Is the town coming in, as Mayor McNamara said, 5 years in or 4 years in, all the ISPs have laid all this groundwork, and for us to come in now and say, okay, forget it, thanks, but no thanks, we're going to build our own, I don't think that certainly wouldn't be my recommendation. Again, there's one committee member, but that would not be my recommendation.
Thank you, Darren. Dan, you had your hand up?
Yep, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I think I'm a bit of a different mindset here. Even this infrastructure is a town asset. The town people are paying taxes, right, to own such an asset, which I think, the way that it is implemented by the ISPs, and if the likes of Tecumseh can implement such an infrastructure, them being a small company, so can the township, and it is a valuable asset, right? And I think there's no disputing the fact that investing in this valuable asset can derive some revenue for the township going forward. Indeed, as with any asset, right, even if one considers their own home as an asset, right, there are costs associated to it, maintenance associated to it, but we all go through it, right? I think I would certainly love to hear the position of our CAO on this piece here. And I think there are more ways to sort of skin a cat, again, for lack of better terminology. One wouldn't necessarily have to, dig up all the streets in our municipality and put new fiber. Some of these can be shared exactly under the same arrangements as they're available right now for tech savvy, that they're available right now for other second tier ISPs, right? And that's just the reality of it. Those guys don't own the infrastructure. But Cogeco owns it, Bell owns it, Telus owns it, and yet they do provide services through that infrastructure. So I am of the opinion that this ought to at least be explored, as it may be a very much profitable asset for the township.
Well, thank you, Dan. I agree with some of the points, but I'm not sure I can agree with all of the points. It certainly would be an asset, but I just know the cost, right, to put it in. And again, I'm not a guy that puts fiber in and day out, right? But I know it is costly, and I guess we'll just leave it at that for the moment. Did anybody have any other comments they may like to share? Aldo.
Just further to Dan's point there, I can see the benefit of looking at ownership, but the current ISPs are cherry picking the more dense areas because it's easy and it's much more profitable. So if you're looking at running fiber to underserviced areas, you're going to have significantly, I guess, less return on your investment if you're looking at it from an investment point, because you're going to hit fewer homes per linear foot of fiber that's run. So that would be my only concern, unless you could run a happy balance between doing that and then perhaps looking at what it would cost to reservice the dense areas and possibly leasing the lines that are currently there. So the initial outlet versus leasing those lines over time, and not having to service them. So a happy medium between the two, maybe, but yeah, I just think that from just trying to lay the fiber for the underserviced areas, the rural areas, I don't know we'd see a return on investment for them.
Right. And Sean, just our path forward at this point, we're collecting the CIRA data, right? That's really going to identify for us, those areas where we're going to, look to move forward and, make the recommendations, whether it be a town-owned infrastructure piece or recommendations for the local ISPs. But we're collecting that data, and to my knowledge, really the north end, 42 north, all the way to the lake. From what I know, pretty much completely covered with Cogeco, Bell, and MNSI. So, to all those point, it would be running fiber into those rural areas, which would be quite expensive. But we're collecting the data right now, and that's really going to drive our decisions moving down the road. Correct?
Yeah, the data will assist in any of those decisions, whether private or public. And you're right, the north end, there are probably still a handful of areas in the north end that might not have, for whatever reason, they're mid-block or outside. And we just had a few out in ward, actually in your ward, I think, a win that you brought to my attention recently. So
yep,
there's still, you're right, there'd be the anomaly now that we'd find an underserved, not to say they're not there. Yeah, so the data, to your point, the data we're collecting will be utilized for which path we take down the road here.
and that'll help us, short-term and long-term, right, for any of those decisions or recommendations. So
we can analyze, linear kilometers of infrastructure that have to be put in relative to potential customers, dots on a map. We could do that analysis internally if it's something we wanted to look at. And all that being said, obviously the town isn't equipped to run a network on our own with with current internal resources. This would, in my mind, probably have to be outsourced anyway. I don't think it's something we would hire a fleet of trucks and installers and a support desk and everything else internally. It's something we would offer the dark fiber to and let somebody else hop onto if that was a scenario we wanted to head. Just okay. Sorry, Mr. Chair. Just cognizant of the time here, and I just wanted to go through. When we're done this discussion, I just want to go through a tick list of takeaways for me for the.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
And Dan, you have your hand up, so maybe one last comment on this issue, and we'll move forward.
One last comment, I think, just echoing what Sean was just saying, is that I think the consideration here is not necessarily running the infrastructure, but owning the asset that is the fiber in the ground, the dark fiber in the ground, right? And that, I think, right now, and again, I have no good indication of actual costs. All I can do is extrapolate from what I'm hearing here with regards to the connectivity to Pelee Island and so on, right? There's a fixed cost to put that fiber in the ground. Just as we have hydro lines right now, we don't have any other contenders to pull additional fiber or hydro lines alongside the ones that are already existing, right? So if the town takes the initiative to say, we're going to be the first ones on these streets, we're going to own the dark fiber, and then we're going to outsource said dark fiber to providers to light up and connect homes. I think that's, again, a fixed cost investment can be budgeted for, is within reasonable costs as far as my understanding is, and can be a potential for continued revenues for years to come.
And it could be something as simple as running the conduit, not necessarily the fiber, right? Because our struggles in the south end is the infrastructure that we can attach to is limited with Hydro One, and they want you to replace poles before you attach fiber to it and all that kind of thing. So it's more expensive to run the conduit, but if it's just an empty conduit and then let the, instead of digging up the yards 3 times, they would have at it through a predefined conduit.
And I promise one last point to what Alda was saying through you, Mr. Chair, is this way the town would have a say in actually controlling the price point of where the service would be offered, right? Yeah. So that to in my mind is a huge incentive. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean, you mentioned you had a couple of takeaways.
Well, my list has grown to 10 now. I started with 2, but that's okay. That's what we're here for. So the 2 we already mentioned, continue with the speed test, monitoring that, reporting back. The tower site, continue that discussion with the powers to be that I mentioned already. I'm going to tap into Darren's knowledge on that too. We'll take that offline. With the mayor and his contacts, continue to monitor the developments with SWIFT and the Western Wardens Caucus for coming announcements. To Dan's point, start the development of a short-term and long-term action plans, and looking to what others have come up with, other committees. I'll bring some of that back to our group. Again, meeting with the mayor, meeting with SWIFT to determine the meaning of what is the meaning of underserved, to make sure we have a clear understanding of what that means and what implications there are with the direction we might be headed in some of our other initiatives. Work with CWE on the Starlink test. If they do actually get one, they've offered that offline for us to do our own testing on throughout the town. So continue to work with them. I have reached out and I do have contacts with many of the ISPs we've talked about tonight. So I'm going to continue to meet with them to understand their future plans and goals for our area and for the region. We touched upon possibly by early in the new year, we would have hopefully 3 meetings under our belt. And I'll look at Christina to schedule that in a minute, but maybe an interim report to council of what we've done. They get a copy of our minutes and they see that with the regular agendas, but 3 meetings in, we should have some good things to report back to them. So that was a good point that was brought up tonight. And then the last one we talked about is exploring municipally owned infrastructure, fixed cost to run fiber and or conduit, and just do a little bit of homework on not getting too far down the road on that, but at least start asking some questions and do some research on what that could possibly look like down the road for us. So think that's enough, at least selfishly for me, for the next 3 months. I'm good with that list. If anybody wants to add or delete, that's fine. But Mr. Chair, that's, and usually we have, in the meeting, we'll have an unfinished business list. So I'll get this to Christina to add to our unfinished business list for the next meeting, so we don't lose track of any of these. And you'll keep me honest in reporting back on these at a future meeting. And Mr. Chair, that's my list. And if you want, Christina can talk about next meeting dates.
Sure. Christina, we do have, yeah, it was unfinished business, new business. So the next meeting is our next agenda item.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Sean and I were discussing, we'd like to try to circle back with the group prior to the Christmas holidays. I know it does tend to get busy for everyone. So again, we would be looking to stick with the Wednesday evening as it appears to accommodate a majority of the group's availability. We would be looking at the 6:30 time slot if that's still agreeable with the members. We're looking at the beginning part of December, right again before the holidays become upon us, looking at Wednesday, December 1st, if that at this moment in time seems
If I
agreeable.
may,
for
Mr.
everyone.
Chair, please stay away from the first Wednesday and third Wednesdays of the month. That's county council.
Certainly, apologies. We could look to
The 8th?
the 8th, yep.
Yeah,
Yep,
that would
or last week of no, or the 4th, no, sorry, no.
No, that's,
Yes, yep,
no,
nope,
let's take care of Christmas. No,
Yep,
but
yep.
The 8th would work for me.
I'm getting
Yep.
some thumbs up, so
Yep.
I will do the same. I'll send a meeting outlook invitation to mark it in everyone's calendars tentatively. And of course, if there is any conflicts, please just let us know in advance of the meeting so we can ensure we have quorum.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for your time this evening, just before 8:30. So that brings us to adjournment. So if I could just get a motion to adjourn the meeting. Dan, and seconded by Darren. All in favor? Opposed? And the meeting is now adjourned. So again, thank you everyone for your time this evening. Stay safe, stay well, and until next meeting.
All right,
Thank you.
good meeting. Take
All
care.
right, thank you.
Good night.
Take care, everyone.